Hey YouTube, what's up? Scarecrow here. Today, I'm gonna do an updated look at my Nubatama Dominate deck since you guys last seen it like a couple weeks ago. Um, got a lot more playtesting in and played it through tournaments and stuff. It's really good. This deck is definitely one of the better decks in the meta at the moment. Yeah, it's a pretty scary deck. So get started with our starter. I'm playing Midori still. This card is really good and fits into what the deck does like really well. I wouldn't run the new starter because the new starter like forces the opponent to have cards out, and you don't really struggle with that in this deck at all. What's more important, I think, which is what this guy contributes to, is that your opponent will often have stuff that's not big enough. Like you're going to force them to call something, so they'll call something that's really small, like a draw trigger. And you can use Midori and cards like him to buff it up so that it's still big enough to actually swing at something. So for the triggers are for heal, for draw. Something to note, some people don't actually notice. You can use this card to buff even an opponent's rear guard if you need to. And then crits, line 4 the Shiranui crit, and 4 unflipper crit. Basically every trigger in this deck can go to soul. This deck is very soul blast heavy, that's helpful. For the grade 1s, playing 3 Mist Frog, and in relation to them, 3 Ozai. Both these two play the same role in the deck, which is to buff up your opponent's rear guards so that, like the starter, they'll be big enough to actually hit what they're swinging at. They do it slightly differently. He buffs himself and the opponent's card. You can do him multiple times a turn, although he's a Soul Blast and he says his deck is Soul Blast heavy. And then the frog gives you soul and replaces himself by drawing a card. But both of them share the same goal of buffing the opponent's cards. Because like people will do something like they'll call like a crit trigger from their hand because it's a 4K, and they're like, this won't be big enough to actually hit me. I won't have to guard it. So what they don't realize though often when they do that is they're taking a 10 shield out of their hand. And then if you can buff it up and make it strong enough, not only did they lose that 10 shield out of their hand, they're either going to have to let it hit or drop another card to guard it. So it's like they lost like 15. And then if you're contributing other effects that buff them up bigger, it's even more so. Then we got our for stride fodder, and for our perk guy we're playing 4 Shiranui. We're playing her over our other choice of Utsure here, because to set up for him, by the time you usually get him set up where you can actually use him, your opponent's going to probably be at 5 or at 4, and the dominated card that's attacking will have a crit on it. So usually it's not likely that you can actually use him in most games. The setup for it takes too long, and the opponent gets pushed back too fast. Whereas in this situation, Shiranui doesn't really matter. Even if the opponent can't afford to take the hit and they're guarding them all anyways, you can still use her to get a counter charge. And this deck does counter blast quite a bit, so it is appreciated. For the grade 2s, playing 3 Enba. Enba is pretty cool. Whenever a dominated unit attacks, he gets buffed by +5. Typically, you can get that off like 2 to 3 times a turn. Typically, he'll usually be like a 24, and a card that's 24 all by itself, which requires a 15 shield, is pretty good. If you throw boosters and stuff behind it, it gets even bigger. And part of the cool thing about him is that when you start your turn with your Zanki, you can use Zanki, call him from hand, opponent calls their card, then you start doing your dominate. So he's a good card to get on the board because he doesn't use an auto on call, and then just have him ready to start doing his things. Then we've got our 4 bear. This card is really good. It's essentially a counterblast 1, draw 1, get plus 10. So it's a 19 that draws a card essentially. It's really good. And then last, playing 4 Ungai. This card is really good. If you've never played it, you're really missing out on how good this thing is. It can turn like 2 9Ks into 11Ks, so it can hit things. You can to make himself like an 11, make a booster 11. Like you could have like a crit out here, call him, and now it's an 11K booster. So if you hit with another 11K, you're hitting 22, and you could even call like you could have like 2 crits in the same column. Call him, and those 2 crits are a 22 column. It's so good. The buffing the opponent's effect isn't so helpful anymore, as like usually the cards are being dominated as soon as they hit the board, whereas the way it used to be. But the fact that he buffs your stuff is good enough. If he's already out there and something's dominated, you can use his effect to discard and draw and make your hand better. For the grade 3s, playing 6 Shiranui, obviously Sanki being the preferable one. I like playing at least 6 good ride targets. Some people can run less. I don't. I just like making sure I can ride a good card. And I'm also playing 2 Mirashiki. I think that's how you say his name. But I'm playing 8 grade 3s. In this build, where you don't have like draw power early game to like help your deck be more consistent into what you want to draw, I'm more comfortable playing 14 1s, 11 2s, and 8 3s, so I can have stride fire and stuff. But that said, this guy is really good. He can be a 21 all by himself. You can do cool things with him, like use him to rest like a Mist Frog and make him a 21, then dominate their card, use your Mist Frog, move to the soul, draw a card. You can combo him with something like the critical, do the same kind of play, rest this, buff him. Basically this thing's just a 21k grade 3. It's pretty good. And for our G-Zone, the 1 Seabreeze, the main star of the deck for Rene. This card is the deck's main win con, and you often use this card as your first stride and your second stride, and typically it's usually your last stride. You almost never have to either lose or win when you go in this typically. But hey, there's room in the G-Zone still. I don't always go for him first stride based on certain situations. Typically if I don't, I'll go into like Tembu here sometimes. Like if I don't think like using him as first stride is going to be worth it, or I'd just be able to spam him later on so his GB3 will be active, like a Temu can be a first stride option. Also another first stride option, but you won't really use it because it's better for the later game if your opponent has a big field or you need to buff yours. Temujin Lord. 1 Mukuro, he's good in very situational type setups, like against like Link Joker and stuff, I guess. But I don't use him too often, that's why we're running around him at 1. One of the GB8, you almost never get to that point, but if you do, this is one of the best GB8s in the game, if you ask me. It makes the opponent use up 3 cards every time they want to guard at least. Very scary good card. And then for the G guards, oh wait, I forgot something. I almost forgot about Drachma. Yeah, it's a good card. You should play Z-Rares in almost every deck, especially in this deck. He actually combos well. You can stride him, dominate their card, attack with it, resolve his skill, bomb their field, cards out of hand. Yeah, can take 3 cards from them and then take another, or take a card out of them and then take 3 cards from them and do a dominate attack. It's very scary. On for the G guards, I cut what's her face, this chick. Just wasn't using her enough, so wanted more room for other things. And now I am running just 2 of the dragon. Still very good card, but you gotta be careful with your Soul Blast management. And then 2 of this guy, just because he's an easy big shield. He can be tricky to set up. Like, you really don't have control of it usually, but he can be a 20 shield or a 25 shield. So, or not 25, but 30. Yeah. So that is it. Thank you guys for watching.